Hi, CDW Account Managers. This is Amy from Fried Technology and my friend and colleague, Mary Ellen from Round Rock ISD. Mary Ellen, say hi so the camera will switch to you.
Hey.
And we're here today to talk to you about Chromebooks. So I kind of love that I'm telling Mary Ellen really what we're doing right here for the first time, because I think it's going to lead her to give some good insights from her experience as a school district leader. So Mary Ellen, the reason we're here today is because the account managers at CDW is the largest reseller of hardware to K-12 in the United States, and they're our most important hardware partner. And they bring us a lot of work, and so we try to help them learn better how to talk to their customers about both professional development, but also about the hardware that we end up training on, because it just benefits all of us if we all are on the same page with this. So what we're here today to try to do is we want to help our account managers get an insight into the educational side of things so that they can start meaningful conversations with their clients beyond what the specs of a computer are. Like, that's become less and less important, and it's become a lot more important for them to understand what are educators going to do with this device and how is it really going to impact the school district. So and CDW has been a real leader in this, and they're truly committed to having those conversations, and they believe that if we can get these conversations going correctly in the beginning, that it's going to benefit us all from a sales perspective, as well as we know that we're doing the right thing for education. So I love that they care about this so much. So account managers, thanks for joining us today. I see a lot of you are there. Appreciate it, because I know a lot of people are out of the office. I want to remind you guys, if you're watching on the YouTube live page, there is a chat over on the side, and we will try to remember to monitor that to see if you have any questions, and it really does help us go in the direction that you need us to if you participate. So if you have any questions at all, if we say education terms you don't understand, please ask, because I guarantee you're not the only person who is thinking, I don't know what she's talking about right now. All right, I'm going to direct you guys to an agenda that we're going to use today, and I'm going to put it up on my screen. And in your browser, those of you guys who have two monitors especially, you should open up another tab or another window, and you can navigate to this agenda. Then if we have any links today or anything like that, then you'll be able to see those links in this agenda. So what you'll do is you'll type in fried.tech/CDW-Chromebook. fried.tech/CDW-Chromebook, and that's all lowercase. And that will get you to today's agenda. You can see the questions that we're going to be talking about, and any information that you need will be posted here. All right, so we'll go ahead and start our discussion then. And my first question that I want to talk to Mary Ellen about is around when schools are trying to make a decision. So for us in this world, both the CDW and the Fried Technology world, we don't want to talk about Apple products at all. We always want to focus our conversations around the products that we believe are best and that we sell and that we know the most about. But in reality, we know that schools are out there trying to make a decision a lot of times between iPads and Chromebooks. We know now that Apple is selling iPads to school district for prices competitive with Chromebooks, and we know people are having those discussions. So Mary Ellen, what would you tell a school district who called and they said, we want to know how Round Rock ISD is using Chromebooks and whether or not we should consider this advice? What would you say to them?
Well, we had the unique situation about 4 years ago. We did something called a next gen pilot, where teachers in the district, we have about 55 schools in the district, so we have a lot of people to work with. And we chose one teacher from each campus to be our next gen pilot teacher. And they were given either a cart full of iPads, Chromebooks, Android tablets, or laptops. And throughout the year, we would meet with that group and talk to them about what they liked, what was working well, what wasn't working well. And what we determined through that, and this was from pre-K all the way up to 12th grade, we determined that our preferred device was the Chromebook. It was the most versatile device. It did everything we needed it to do. Our preferred device at that time was the iPad for primary grades and for fine arts because of some of the apps that they use that we can't really replicate as well on the Chromebook. And that was even 4 years ago, before so many things were web-based. And now, for the most part, we have Chromebooks and laptops in all of our schools. We have iPads at the primary grade levels, K and first, and even those teachers now are looking more towards using Chromebooks. And some of the reasons are, we feel like the iPads are a great tool for a lot of things, but it's more a tool to consume, more so than to create. So some of the drawbacks the teachers told us about were, even though some of the teachers had external keyboards, it just wasn't as seamless to use a keyboard with an iPad. They loved that the Chromebook was such a clean slate when the students opened it. It wasn't cumbersome with lots of icons on the desktop. They would primarily direct the students to their Google Drive and their Google accounts to do everything they needed to do. And that was even like right as Google Classroom was coming out. And so now, as more and more teachers are using Google Classroom with their students and directing them to Google products, and more of the products that we use are becoming web-based, like Read 180 is something that we use, and now that's web-based. They can do everything they need to do on the Chromebook. So if you would ask our teachers today, their preferred device would be a Chromebook. The very few exceptions would be fine arts has some uses for iPads that they really can't replicate on the Chromebook device. And the PCs, that's just not even something that our teachers are interested in because it takes so long to boot up, and then they have to log into their accounts separately. They're logging into the network and then their account.
That is so awesome. You brought up so many good points, Mary Ellen, and I was typing while you were talking so that the account managers can have that. And I want to go back to one point that you made that I think is maybe the most important thing that you talked about, that account managers can also get schools into discussions about. And it's what I always tell people about Chromebooks too, consuming versus creating. Can you go back and so pretend you're talking to somebody who has never worked in education, even though the guys watching today and ladies do know a lot about education, but there may also be some new people on the team. So what would you tell a non-educator that means, consuming versus creating?
I would say when we put the devices in front of the students, when they're using iPads, they are accessing apps, things that someone else made for them to practice what they're doing in class, practice learning. There's a lot of good educational games and apps out there, but it's something that somebody else made for our students to use to help them learn a concept or to practice something that they have been taught. The Chromebooks are a better tool for the students to make those experiences themselves, for them to demonstrate what they have learned. So I think that's the biggest difference, is if we give them an iPad, they're generally just going in and practicing what they've been doing. And with a Chromebook, they are writing the script, they are writing the research paper, they are taking the pictures, manipulating things, putting together presentations. So that's the differences that we see.
Yes, that's such a great explanation. So I typed in our document, with the Chromebooks, what we see in education is that students are actually doing something in order to learn. Mm-hmm. So it's not just practice or playing games, and that's why it's such a transformative technology. And I feel like those are words that our account managers can really use when they talk to educators. So here's a problem that we run into a lot, Mary Ellen. So we are talking to a school district, and maybe we're speaking to could be a superintendent, could be a CNI director, could be a technology director, and that person has possibly, I know it seems inconceivable, but possibly maybe use Gmail, but maybe doesn't
Mhm.
even really know what Google Drive is. So how would you help someone understand what a Chromebook is if they've never used the Google, they're not a part of the Google ecosystem yet?
Um, the way I explain it, and I've actually had to do this for family members and friends that they'll ask me, what is a Chromebook? And so I always tell them, like, well, it's like your laptop, but there are no programs loaded on it. It's just a portal to get to the internet. And because we use Google Drive and the Google Suite, if we have something that gets us on the internet, then we can get into our G Suite account. And the G Suite account is where we have all of the things that you normally would find on the desktop of a PC. That's where we have our word processing. That's where we have our tools to make presentations. That's where we have our mail and our calendar. All of those things are within the G Suite that we are giving to all of our students. So basically, the Chromebook is just a portal to get to the internet. And once we're on the internet, we're using our G Suite and any web-based applications that we use. So we have access to everything we need. It's really interesting because in just the last few years, I remember, about 4 years ago when we got Chromebooks on campus, our teachers didn't know what they were. And so we had half of our carts were Chromebooks and half were PC laptops. And when the teachers would check out devices to use in their class, they were tending towards the laptops because that was a familiar device. Then when they started using the Chromebooks, I saw that shift, and now their preferred device is the Chromebook because it's so much faster to boot up, and you need to conserve all those minutes in class. You don't have time for 10 or 5 or 10 minutes of your class time to be taken up booting up a computer. When you open the Chromebook, you push the button, it boots up in how long?
8
10
seconds.
seconds?
8
Yeah.
seconds or less. Yeah.
Yeah. So the kids are on and they're ready to work immediately. So now that all the things that they were using before that maybe used to have to be loaded on a PC, we've seen, I think there's very few things now that we need programs loaded. And that's the only thing you wouldn't be able to do with a Chromebook is install a program.
I found it so interesting. I was working with a group of teachers and I had really focused hard on the Chromebook. I had them use a Chromebook, and I went back and touched base with them again and said, how's it going with your students and all that? Well, this particular school had Chromebook carts, and the Chromebook carts after that tended to be checked out all the time. And the only negative feedback I got from the teachers was, well, we can't do it because we can't get the Chromebook carts. But in this school, they also had laptop carts.
Yeah.
But the teachers didn't want to use the laptop carts, and they were perfectly good laptops, and they had the Chrome browser on there, and technically the students could have been doing all those same instructional activities, but it was just perceived as too cumbersome at that point. So yeah, I agree with you. Once people have tried it, they just don't want to go back and try
Right.
something.
Yeah. And we're even due for a refresh coming up this spring. And that was one of our options, was to stay 50-50 with half laptops and half Chromebooks. And I went and I talked to a lot of our teachers and I said, is there anything you're doing in your class that you would have to have a PC? And with the exception of our business teacher, who is actually teaching coding and web design and using photo editing on Adobe, with that exception, none of our teachers are doing something that specifically requires that they use a laptop. And so after interviewing our teachers, they said they would rather have probably 90% Chromebooks with just a few laptop carts, if that's something, and at this point, I think it's just a fear of not having the laptops, because what if we need to do something that requires a laptop?
Yeah.
But when I asked them what those things would be, they couldn't think of them.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting to see that evolution from being on this campus when we had netbooks, if y'all remember netbooks,
Oh, yeah.
to move towards the next gen that I talked about earlier, where we got to try out lots of different devices. And then we really have landed on the Chromebooks as our preferred device.
That's so cool. All right. Well, another area, and I know you know this too because you are a Google certified trainer and you train for us. It's hard when you first start working with people who haven't been a part of the Google ecosystem to help them understand how important extensions are in the Chrome environment. So I wonder if you could talk about that and what extensions you guys are using in the classroom and of what importance those are to you.
Oh, yeah. The extensions just add to the functionality of the G Suite. One of the extensions that we use a lot with students is screencasting extensions. And that is a great way for the students to be able to demonstrate their understanding of a topic to their teacher. They can capture what's going on their screen. So generally what happens is the students make a presentation in Google Slides. Then they screencast the presentation and they're narrating it and they're turning it into their teacher through Google Classroom. So I would say, as far as students go, the screencasting tool we like, Screencastify, for our students is a big one. We also use Snap and Read for helping those kids that have learning challenges and dyslexia, and they need that auditory. They can click on the Snap and Read extension and they can have things read to them. Our teachers like the Add to Classroom extension so that they can add things easily to Google Classroom on the fly. I'm just looking up in my toolbar to see all of the ones that I have up there, but those are some of our favorites. And that was another thing too, that was kind of a learning curve at first. Our teachers didn't really understand about apps and extensions, and they thought that they were adding them to the device, and then they started learning as they were using one device and changing to another one. They're like, oh, everything is still here. As long as you sign into your Chrome account and you make sure everything is syncing, then all of those apps and extensions are going to be on whatever device you're on.
Yes,
It's
that's
kind of
huge, like it makes your brain explode when you finally
when
get that.
you have that light bulb moment. But it kind of makes me remember back when we had a computer lab, and when I did projects with my students, and we would have to walk down the hall and go into the computer lab. And one of the big projects we did was a movie maker project. And we worked on it over a whole week, but the kids had to go back to the computer that they had started the project on, because that's where all their files lived, on that particular computer. And if they accidentally sat down at the wrong computer, then opened their movie maker project, none of their files were there. They had all those little caution signs. And that's one thing you don't have to worry about on a Chromebook. You can close the computer, log off of it, and then go to another classroom or go to the library, open another Chromebook, log in, and that's all your stuff. It's still there. So that's kind of magical.
I had kind of forgotten about that, but you're right. I used to have, when I was a teacher, I had classroom computers, big, huge, monitor and tower and all that kind of stuff. And my kids would be like, you're on my computer, you have to move. All my stuff's on that computer. But at the time, there was no such thing as cloud storage, and that wasn't possible, but it's such an innovation for the classroom now because I can get to it on my phone, and I can go to the library and get there, and I can change classes, and I don't have to take the same device with me. So that's another selling point, account managers, that schools don't have to go one-to-one to have a continuity of use across the classrooms, because students can log in wherever they are in a few seconds and get to all of their work on any device. And that potentially, if schools aren't ready to do one-to-one, this is a huge selling point. So think about that when you're talking to your clients. I just added in a screenshot into our agenda of extensions. So I wanted you guys who might be unfamiliar with them to see these are some of the extensions, just the ones I have active in my browser right now. Tools, like Mary Ellen said, that add in functionality to the Chrome browser. So I don't know how else to explain that. I think you did a pretty good job of talking about that, but teachers get really, really excited about them when they learn about extensions. All right. We're going to move on to question number 4 because I want to make sure we get to number 5 before we discontinue today. And that is, what is student engagement and how can you get leaders thinking about the bigger reasons to implement technology? So one of the conversations that we always try to have is, why are you doing this implementation? Why is this important to your school district and your students? And these are words that you will hear a lot of savvy administrators and school district leaders say. They want to increase student engagement. So I've shared a slide with you guys that tells you what that means. And I'm going to ask Mary Ellen her opinion. Mary Ellen, when people, generally speaking, in the education world say the word engagement, do you think they really understand what that term means? Or do you think they're mostly talking about compliance?
I think a little of both. I think when they talk about engagement, it's they hope that the student is enjoying what they're doing in class. But I think engagement really is making the student want to take ownership of what they're learning for a purpose. And I think that's one of the things that Google itself can bring to the table in education, is making the students want to do their best and want to own their learning. Because with G Suite, and I know we're talking about Chromebooks, but because the Chromebook is web-based and we're using G Suite and it's in the cloud, potentially everything they're doing can have that bigger audience. And so I think that when we look at engagement, we're looking at ways that our students can share outside the walls of the classroom in some way, and explain what they're doing to other people or share their learning with other people. So yeah, I think people's intentions are good when they talk about engagement, but they might not even realize what the possibilities are.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I definitely want our account managers to know and be educated about that term, because I feel like they actually have an opportunity to educate the leaders they're talking to, even just asking that question, which is, what is the goal of your implementation? And I always like to restate that for people. And that is, if we look back on this years down the road, how will we know if we have succeeded? And if you can get people thinking about that, maybe we don't just buy more technology and not have any idea whether it's having an impact. And that helps our superintendents support decisions to the board. It's just going to help everybody know that what they're doing is the right thing and that it's going to be effective and that they're going to know if it's effective, which is another aspect. So before we go today, I want to make sure that we get to number 5, because I think that it is going to be important and interesting to our account managers. So one of the key sales strategies of Apple is selling the ability to edit video and music on their devices. That's a big thing that they tout. They have people do this when they go to learning experiences. One thing I would say to that, and I'm not even going to try to say it delicately right now, you guys will figure out how to say it delicately, is that when we are working, especially with students from poverty who may struggle with basic reading, writing, and mathematical skills, we are not very often making videos using a camera. We're doing what Mary Ellen described, which is screencasting. We're recording our own thinking and our own work and sharing that with our teacher. But as far as going out and creating a video in the way that Apple is suggesting to people that they do, this is a fairly rare activity. Maybe you can find a delicate way to point that out, that most schoolwork still is using a keyboard, and students, often need that to be built into their device. But I want you to know that that's something that is happening over in the Apple ecosystem, and something that your customers and my mutual customers are hearing a lot about. So I don't want you to be empty-handed when you get to that discussion. So I want to tell you, this is how you do these things on the Chromebook. So remember, we talked about extensions. Well, These elements can work as extensions, or they can work independently as apps, which is another tool we have on the Chromebook, or honestly, they're really just accessed through the web. So Mary Ellen's talked a lot about that and done a great job of explaining that. WeVideo is the tool that we use on Chromebooks to make and edit video. It's very similar to what people are getting in iMovie, and it's one of those tools that you can transfer your knowledge to an industry standard tool. So that's good verbiage for you to keep. That's something that we know our students may be doing as a job later on. So they need tools that are legitimate so that they can transfer their knowledge, and WeVideo does that. Explain Everything is part of the Chromebook Creative Bundle. Whether you guys know or not, you sell the Creative Bundle at CDW, and you can sell this with Chromebooks. I'm guessing there's a SKU in your system for that. If not, somebody email me and we'll figure out how to get it in there because you need it. So Explain Everything is a tool that does what Mary Ellen was talking about, allows students to video their voice and their screen so that they can show what they have learned. And Soundtrap is a really amazing tool that lets students create music. So they can create narration if they want to speak. They can, I don't know, make a rap about their math work, or all those kind of creative things that people generally think, well, you can't do that on an iPad, on a Chromebook. You can do these things on a Chromebook, and these are the tools that make those things happen and make them really rich. And if people say, well, we don't want to have to install anything, well, you're going to have to install things on an iPad anyway to do anything at all. So it's really very much the same concept. It's just a different way to reach these tools. Mary Ellen, do you have any experience with any of these three tools?
Yeah, WeVideo, we use that a lot. And one of the things we like about it is collaborative. Students can share their work and work on the same video project together. So the learning curve is very small. There's two versions of WeVideo. One is for, I can't remember their terminology, but one is for beginners, and it has very few functions. So it's really easy to get started. And that's what I usually have the kids do. And then as soon as they ask, well, how do I put some text on my images, and how do I do this? Then I'm like, okay, we need to switch over to the advanced version. And then there's all of the functionality that you would find on iMovie or Movie Maker. So we love that one. Plus, once they finish their video, it's online. You can upload it to YouTube, or you can just get a link to it on WeVideo. So it makes it really nice if the teacher is using Google Classroom or even collecting their work through a Google form, the students just drop a link in. So you don't have to render and download anything onto the desktop to then upload it in a different way. So WeVideo is great. I haven't used to Explain Everything though.
Pretty cool too. Check it out sometime. But I love what you just said about the way that students are turning their work in, because that's another thing. The workflow on the Chromebook is much simpler, even when you're dealing with video.
Mm-hmm. And the last one, Soundtrap, I had a teacher approach me last fall. She wanted her students to podcast, and just the term podcasting kind of makes you think I need an Apple device.
Right.
And so she said, I really want to do a podcast with my students. And we do have a few iPads on our campus, but they're only in the library. And so she was like, how can I do that? Is there something I can use on the Chromebook? And Soundtrap is what we ended up using. And she loved it. And it was really cool because she's an amazing teacher anyway, but she introduced the students to Soundtrap, and their learning curve was very minimal for the students. They figured it out a lot quicker than we did as adults. So they created their podcast. She had them share their podcast on a shared slide presentation so that all of the class's podcasts were on a slide deck. And then they could go through and watch or listen to each other's podcast and use the comment feature on slides to comment back for things they thought were good and things they thought could be improved. And then the students went back and made changes to their podcast based on the feedback. And then she posted them on her website. So it was a really neat project. Then coincidentally, Monday, when we got back to school, a teacher said, I need to talk to you. NPR is having a podcasting contest this spring. And she said, I really want my students to do it, but how can I do that? I have Chromebooks. And I said, let me tell you about Soundtrap. And that's just using that one function of Soundtrap, because Soundtrap is kind of like GarageBand, if you have to compare, because it has all the musical instruments and you can do all of the music editing on Soundtrap. But all we're doing with it is the easiest thing you can do, and that's clicking on the microphone and recording our voices. So it was a really nice little dipping your toe in, but it can do so much more. And now that our students know it exists, then they know, okay, so next time I make a presentation, I can make my own music to go with it because it's on Soundtrap.
That's so cool. I'm so glad you told me about that project. I really hadn't thought about using it for podcasting, which is weird because podcasting is kind of like, I feel like it's having a resurgence right now. So great for our account managers to be able to bring up that term and to speak knowledgeably about how that's done on a Chromebook. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Well, Mary Ellen, I'm so thrilled that you were able to join today and that you were up for me just flinging random questions at you. And you didn't seem afraid at all. You seemed
No, it was fun. I don't mind evangelizing about Chromebooks and Google.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining. And account managers, I'm going to go check your questions and see if any of you ask anything. And Wendy has a question. How would you compare distributing apps to the different devices? Great question, Wendy. So can you talk for just a minute, Mary Ellen, and then I promise I'll let you get back to work. What was it like managing the iPads versus managing the Chromebooks as far as getting those apps onto those devices?
Well, honestly, I manage the iPad apps on campus. The Chromebook apps are managed by our tech support crew. And we really don't push a lot of apps out to our Chromebooks. The only apps that we've pushed out are for standardized testing. And so that is an important thing to bring up too. Standardized testing is secure on Chromebooks. We do PSAT, STAR testing, TELPAS testing, and Ames web testing on our Chromebooks. And it's the easiest device to use for that. The pushing the apps to the iPad, we purchase the apps through the VPN, and then I push them out. With the Chrome apps, I have to make a request for that. But like I said, it really hasn't come up very often. We had a meeting with other ITSs from the district, and somebody was talking about, how often do you have to push things out to your Chromebook? And we kind of looked around and was like, well, I don't really have to do that very often because the students and the teachers can add those extensions and apps themselves. So
basically it's a pull method instead of a push method.
Right. And in the admin console, you can decide what's available to what user groups, and then they grab whatever they need.
Yes, so awesome. It's just a different mentality. So
it's kind of a self-service rather than me deciding what you get.
And I can tell you Wendy knows the answer to that because she recently came to CDW from Leander, and she's asking because she wants to make sure all the account managers who are watching today know that. And it's a savvy question because it is something we should be talking to customers about. So thanks for adding that in, Wendy. All right, Mary Ellen, I promised I was going to let you go. Thank you so much for joining today. And CDW account managers, let us know what you think of this. We'll be sending out a survey, and then we will start planning our topic for next month. So thanks for joining, and we hope you learned something new today. Thank you again, Mary Ellen.
Sure, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.